All right,
Next
so
guy,
moving on
please.
to the next guy, Jalin Hyatt, Tennessee wide receiver, 6 foot, 176 pounds. Oh, 9-inch hands. I forgot to mention the hands on the
Got
last
to
one.
mention the hands.
4.40 in the 40, 1.50 10-yard split, 135-inch broad jump. Whoa.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And a 40-inch vertical. Last year at Tennessee, in 12 games, he had 67 receptions, 1,267 yards, and 15 touchdowns, 1 rushing attempt for 0 yards.
2022 Bolitnikoff winner.
Yes,
He was. And he was kind of under the radar for most of his career until he played Alabama. And then the Alabama game happened.
5 touchdowns?
5 touchdowns in a single game against who traditionally people view as one of, if not the best teams in college football. So when you can put together that type of highlight reel in a single game,
Just running wild.
it's impressive, and that's going to move you up people's draft boards. And I think that had a lot to do with, why he's being talked about as one of the top tier guys in this class. For me, after watching the tape, I do not have him as one of the top tier guys in this class.
Third tier. A lot of it's weird to call a player Fugazi that you kind of like at the same time, but his numbers are real Fugazi.
They are. And he is someone that will fill a good specific role in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think will be a very good help to an NFL team. I don't know outside of best ball, underdog, he would be a great place to be drafted.
Sure.
But I don't know that I would want him on my fantasy team starting regularly. So he got one of the worst release scores in this class for me, partly because we never got to see him do it.
Yep.
Let's say how to give him.
I was actually wondering too.
He was free as a bird.
So they intentionally schemed him consistently in the stack.
Art Briles.
He was used almost exclusively in the slot or off the line.
So
89% of his routes came from the slot.
he had significantly less press coverage. Like it averaged around like 200 to 300 reps of press coverage over these wide receivers' career.
I wrote the one time I saw it, he was affected and couldn't break through the one time.
He had 31 snaps where he faced press. Guess how many catches he had? 1.
Yeah.
So
That makes sense. The one time I saw it, he didn't look great. It affected
he did
him.
it. So they
1.
intentionally schemed him to not have to deal with that. He's not good enough for NFL teams to scheme him that way. They're not going to go out of their way to allow him to make those types of plays consistently. At times, sure. So he got the lowest release score out of anybody in this class for
A
me.
lot of safeties he was running against.
A lot of safeties.
A lot of blown coverages. Only half his touchdowns.
so-
Only half.
Just half.
So obviously we mentioned it. Great top end speed, a guy that can get downfield. He's got decent length to him as well, so he can, have a bigger catch radius than some of these other speed guys that we're talking about. So good burst, that kind of stuff. Tracks the ball, fantastic down the field.
I wrote he taxed the ball really well.
There you go.
Saw.
There you go.
There you go.
I type like I talk.
He tax it. So there are a lot of good things to his game, but when we're talking about a player that it was probably going to be drafted right now, it's looking like the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft, probably second round, maybe if things don't go well, maybe third round, but a day 2 guy.
Second round.
I think second round is the most likely scenario for him right now. I just don't see enough of a well-rounded game for me to be that interested at the price point that he's probably going to be going in your rookie drafts.
See, I don't know where he's going to be going in your rookie draft because you should probably go in the back end of the first of your rookie draft, right around there, maybe high second. So it sounds like we just kind of poo-pooed on Jalin Hyatt a little bit. So let me kind of take it back.
Yeah,
just a little bit
you be a
more
little
here.
nicer than I was.
He did put on a little bit of weight as pro day. He came in at 184, so a little bit heavier than 176. Ran a 7.06 3-cone as pro day as well, which is pretty good for being 6 foot.
Yeah,
Solid.
That's pretty good.
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I'm surprised by that, to be honest, after seeing his movement skills and his inability to sink his hips.
And that's at 184. Like he
Yeah,
did at
sure.
184 pounds. So he actually did a pretty good 3-cone there. I want to bring that up there at Tennessee. We mentioned a Blitnikoff winner, but so here's the thing, going back to the negatives just a little bit, like he did it all under Art Briles. And if you wonder what he does, is like Art Briles runs these schemes where people are literally just schemed open, out of the slot where they're facing the safeties. A lot, you get, like Garrett said, a free cushion to run, and you have these like deep routes that you just go and you win. We saw Corey Coleman win.
Yes.
The Blitnikoff under Art Briles and become a first round pick and never pan out. And to be honest with you, none of Art Briles' players that went in those top rounds ever pan out. The best one of all time literally had the worst stats of all of them. That was Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon only had, out of those, 714 yards, and he went a second round to the Browns, had that one monster year, was Dynasty guy overall. But, I mean, he had guys like Kendall Wright, Donnie Avery, Corey Coleman. They were all drafted in the top two rounds.
Was he still there for Mims?
I think that was the other coach.
Okay.
Mims wasn't there. So...
The tradition continued.
Yeah.
Yeah. Michael Gallup, I think, went to Baylor too.
So he has a history of that. But, I mean, so the biggest thing I like
I feel like that's
is
a no.
That's a no.
Yeah.
he's got the height, Jalin Hyatt. He's got the vertical speed, which wins at today's NFL level. And when I really came impressed,
Colorado State. That's who it was.
Okay, nice.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. What I like the most about Jalin Hyatt is obviously his speed, his acceleration, like the way he could win vertically, is I thought he had really good hands. For a guy that plays that way, being able to catch the ball away from his body, he can go up and get the football, and then he was actually good in space as well. So, and the reason I bring it up is when you usually see a player like this, like the big, the taller, like 6 foot, like a Will Fuller, essentially, right?
Yeah.
It's a good comp.
Smells like cabbage. A Will Fuller, usually their hands
Small
are
hands.
super suspect, right? Jalin Hyatt's kind of the opposite. Like he's this vertical, deep threat, real good speed, good acceleration, who has really good hands. So I'm impressed with that. So that's what kind of like, even though like I have his numbers are fugazi, a lot of blown coverages, a lot of safety crap, he does still have the ball skills for me with the go to speed in today's NFL that it still works. So when I'm amongst a class of average wide receivers that all have a ton of red flags, that all, look like a bunch of like wide receiver 3s in fantasy and a couple wide receiver 2s. And listen, people are going to get the draft capital in this class, and somebody's going to hit outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Somebody for sure is going to hit. Somebody's going to surprise us. I think Jalin Hyatt does have some of the skill set that has the potential to be a fantasy football asset, right? Like kind of like that running back that could break off a couple big runs. I think Jalin Hyatt, if he can get the right draft capital in the right situation, I think where he might not be using and be a PPR monster, I think he can have to give you the potential to give you the yards and touchdowns to still produce on a weekly basis. I think I think his hands are good enough, and I think he tracks the ball well enough, and I think his speed is good enough that he can still contribute from a fantasy football level. So
you're a little higher on him than I am because I don't.
He's intriguing to me from a fantasy football aspect. I think there's a lot of Listen,
I just don't know that I would trust him week to week with his style of play and the lack of route diversity that we've seen from him, the release off the line. Like, there's just enough of those yellow flags that I have a hard time believing, or at least early on, these guys can develop some of these skills.
It's going to be hard for him. And he had so much separation. Like, I have no idea if he's good in contested catches.
You didn't see many at all.
He only had 5. He only had 5 contested catches, period. We mentioned the thing about press coverage. His route tree is really limited because, like I said, he played 90% from the snaps. I after watching it, you said about his hips, I thought he was a little tight-hipped as well, so I was surprised by the 7.05.3 cone. Yeah. I did go through a lot of people pro days numbers for this episode, and I was like, a lot of people had a little bit better 3 cones than I thought, too, just to say. Sure. It is a pro day.
It's a pro day number.
And he also we have to bring to attention as well Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman went down, and he stepped up. So there's a concern there, but it's also, hey, somebody went down, he stepped up. You can't hold that against him. But over the last 2 seasons, in the games that Tillman actually played in, he never had more than 75 receiving yards. So, he didn't really step up there as well when Tillman was on the board. And then when Tillman was gone, which is I think those 6 games, he averaged about 124 yards per game. So, in the offense with Art Briles, with the situation, there's a lot of stuff that says, hey, this is all not real life.
Who do you have higher between the two? Do you have Tillman higher or Hyatt higher? For me, while you're thinking about it, Cedric Tillman came in with a 72.75, Jalin Hyatt 71.9. So about a point higher.
Let me look at my rankings
on Tillman for me. So it's very close then, is what you're saying.
The problem is these guys, they're let me put it this way.
I think you guys are a lot higher on Tillman than me.
That's fair.
So, I mean, I'm not so my breakdown of Hyatt here. I think he's.
I have Hyatt slightly higher.
I think he's.
Okay.
I think he's stiff in the hips. I think he's run a lot of routes. I like started actually writing down the routes that he ran, and obviously he runs the go. He's got the post. He's got the out, the slant, the curl, the comeback, the screen. He's got all those kind of in his bag of tricks. He doesn't run any of them well though, except for the go stuff and like the slants, the stuff that you can just stick a foot in the ground and go. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because that kind of stuff translates to, I think, is kind of, we'll call it upright. We describe running backs as kind of upright runners. Mm-hmm. He's kind of an upright route runner.
He is,
and that doesn't lend itself to certain routes. You're
not running the whip.
Yeah, you can't run the whip if you can't sink your hips. Yep. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And so if he's in an offense where he is highlighted just his strengths, if he becomes what did they call Michael Thomas
slant boy?
If he's in that kind of offense, maybe he could become something. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what he's going to have to be kind of force fed into until he develops, I think, or just a straight go guy. I mean, you don't want him to be that for fantasy purposes because you're just never going to be able to rely on the production.
He just seems like your traditional Z receiver.
Yeah.
Like that's what he seems like to me. He seems like your prototypical good
Deshaun Jackson. Go deep.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but Deshaun Jackson was able to contribute.
Will Fuller, sorry,
Will Fuller. I think Will Fuller is a very good comp.
Yeah. So it's just difficult for me to say, hey, because he's got some things, but I don't know that he's ever going to be able to be more than a wide receiver 4 or 5 for your fantasy team because you're just not going to get it consistently.
That's this draft class as a whole, though. And that's to be fair. So it's like where are you going to pick your poison in this draft class? And like I said, I mean, his speed and those hands are good enough for me to kind of bump him up for him.
They're very good. I agree with that.
And it's going to come down with a lot of these guys is, like you said, like if he could fall into that situation with the slants and the go route, like we're going to have the same, like we're going to get real redundant if we keep saying that because like a lot of these receivers we're going to talk about need to go into the right system. Like they have to be placed correctly because some of the guys I have the top of my list.
Like who's in Houston?
I'm hoping for outlier seasons.
Who's in Houston?
Robert Woods. And Nico Collins.
And John Mechie. Like
and John
if he went there, he's got a shot to develop and be like the guy.
And maybe they draft Hooker because it sounds like they're not drafting a quarterback.
If he goes to a place where there's already an established number 1, he's number 2 at the very best, and and then he's very hit or miss. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at when he gets drafted.
But in some ways, though, I want him to get drafted to a team as a number 2 because I don't think he has the skill set and the physicality to be a number 1.
I know everything to be good at Buffalo.
Basically replacing Gabe Davis?
Yeah, replacing Gabe Davis. Like the quick slants to go routes with Josh Allen's arm, like the beat coverage. I think he'd be a really good fit in Buffalo.
I can see it.
So again, say Jalin Hyatt gets drafted in the second round by the Buffalo Bills. So late second round by the Buffalo Bills. Like
they give him a year to develop.
Yeah,
and then get rid of Gabe Davis.
Then all of a sudden, like, oh, I like Jalin. Like, okay, this kind of pans out for me a little bit here. So I like Jalin Hyatt.
Replace what they wanted Mecole Hardman to be in Kansas City.
There you go. Another spot that you have to like, him and Sky Moore, 2 completely different receivers. Mm-hmm. So that can kind of off balance. Like he needs that, like him and like, you can't say, well, Keenan Allen's like him and Mike Williams don't mesh, right? Like they don't fit there. There's going to be a lot like him and Drake London don't mesh. But I think in Buffalo with Stephon Diggs, like that's a real good fit for him, and definitely with Josh Allen at quarterback as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of places where Jalin Hyatt does work. That's what I'm saying. I think it goes back to like how good I thought his hands were and the way he attacks the football with that size and with that speed. I'm not as negative as you are. Like I do see a path, like I said at Buffalo, I see a path for him to be actually fantasy football relevant. And again, I don't think any of these guys are wide receiver 1s outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba. But I think that clears a path for him now. I'll say, okay, I see a wide receiver 2 path for him. Instead of like, oh, that wide receiver 3 we're finishing the year because, again, kind of like his college career, a little Fugazi, because he had 8 touchdowns and 80-yard receptions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you look at his week to week, and it's very up and down. 28, 73, 166, 58, 63, 207, 174, 138.
It's a best ball player right there.
It is a total best ball player, and that's the kind of production that you might be getting from a guy like this, just because that's what his skill set lends itself to. A very up and down roller coaster type of stuff. So for me, on a championship team, he's a wide receiver 4 and 5, a fill-in guy, a bye week type of guy. Yeah. And I don't know how high you feel comfortable taking a guy like that. For me, it's not in the first round.
No, second round.
Yeah,
Dude, it's going to be all running backs. And that's it.
Yeah.
If people are like, oh, I can't believe you have Dalton and Kincaid so high. Like, well, I feel very confident in his ability.
You'd be proud of me. I did a mock the other night, and I took him. He was available, even in 1QB, he was available at 110, and I was like, done and done. Dalton Kincaid. Bam.
Yeah, because you feel good about
110? That's late.
Felt great about
higher
it.
than that. I thought you were saying you're talking about 1.5.
No,
That's how
I
you
just-
take your pants off.
Well,